Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is the recorded and live onboarding session for the first cohort of the Active Inference textbook group. And this session is going to cover many of the sections of our Coda and hopefully resolve your uncertainty about participating in different aspects of the textbook group. So there will be some presentations, but also a ton of time for questions. So feel free to use the chat box on the bottom right-hand side to add any questions. Hello, welcome. Feel free to use the chat box on the bottom right side to add any questions. And also feel free to raise your hand, and then we'll be able to see that hand raised if you'd like to ask your question, but also it could be really helpful just to add it in the chat during this presentation. So you can click on the screen that's being shared to see it zoomed in. And so you should be able to see my info screen and some clicks. All right. So welcome everybody to the ActInf Lab, whether it's your first time participating in ActInf Lab or in anything related to active inference. Welcome. Hope that this is like a space where we can really have some amazing things happen. This Coda that we're all looking at and that we all have access to is our shared epistemic niche. And so you can, of course, have your own notes and own documents, but this is our shared collaborative niche. We are working through the textbook and learning active inference, this recent textbook by Parr, Pizzullo, and Friston. And by right-clicking, you can download the PDF full or the one where the PDF pages and the book pages are aligned, just in case you wanted to download it. And it's also awesome that it's an open source textbook. If you ever have any questions about anything related to participating in the textbook group or in any aspect of ActInf Lab, then activeinference@gmail.com is a good email address to contact. Okay. So I'm going to, in the sidebar, go to this second one, rules. And also this sidebar can be shown or hidden with the two arrows. So first, we'll go over some of the rules, and also with the understanding that this is an evolving area and it's our first cohort. So just super appreciative, and it's really awesome for those from many different places and stages who have stepped up to engage in this way. And we stipulate that by engaging with this Coda and in the live meetings, so not in private conversations, not in your own private documents, but within the shared spaces that are synchronous and asynchronous that we're creating together, we're in a participatory open science space. And that means that no proprietary or inappropriate information will be shared, and that more positively, any ideas and writing and contributions that are shared in this shared Coda or during these recorded sessions that we'll have, these are understood to be declared as Creative Commons CC BY attribution. So state otherwise or don't say it if it's different, because that's how it's going to be understood in the Commons. And then, of course, if somebody's like interested in this area of attribution and all of this in online spaces and participatory communities, that's an important area. During the course of the textbook group, we are students. So we're interacting here as individuals on the path of learning and applying. So some of us might be interested in research as well, and there will be hopefully a ton of time to connect and find those collaborations. But we're going to keep the regime of attention on the learning, the familiarity, accessibility, and competency of active inference as it is in that textbook. That doesn't mean it's going to be the only document that we look at. Other resources are going to come into play, but it's about learning, not research. And we're interested in this textbook. That's what's bringing us together. And please be an engaged learner, however that means for you. So whether you're checking in once in a while and just asking some questions here and there, adding a comment like by selecting text and then on the right side hitting the add comment, whatever that kind of participation looks for you, or maybe you're interested in reskilling and in 3 months you'd like to be in a totally different position and you're approaching this in a multiple hours per day way. We just hope that your participation is open and authentic. And again, if you have any questions about it, you can email. The next page we'll look at is the directory. So the directory has links to the different sections of the Coda. And anytime you see like a blue link with an emoji next to it, that's something you can click on and go to that page. So this has just descriptions on what the different pages are. And it's what the onboarding is, and it's also this like an asynchronous onboarding page. And if something's unclear, again, you could just say, I'm not really sure about this. What does it mean to do ... Okay, so that's kind of the preliminaries, is just welcoming those who are new and returning to ActInf Lab, stating some of the rules and bases for our shared experience, and then just describing the structure of this Coda. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the onboarding, and feel free during this or at any time to add those questions into the chat. Okay, so here in the onboarding section, as a participant, you have total access to the Coda and the knowledge base here, which we're going to be exploring in this session. And so we suggest that, especially for those who are new to Coda, they may want to watch this playlist that covers some of the basics of Coda. And there's also people to ask if you have any questions, but it's something like a cloud document and a wiki, because we do have a version history, although it's also easy to make edits. And you'll find that some pages are locked, like this page cannot be directly edited in the text by a participant. However, they're able to modify these, as many have already done. So we're going to talk about like the student workspace and the student practices and things like that. And then to help this sort of self-onboarding that everyone can go through, we have several things that you can do and engage with right now. So first, what you can do is add your name into the onboarding checklist table below and fill up the relevant checklists. So this is referencing another table, which is the list of students. So these are just the people who have RSVP'd. And then people have selected, and we can add new rows, people have selected from this dropdown, or by typing their name, they can select and then can add checkboxes when they have completed different stages of this onboarding. So here's just a few things that people can do. You can have the physical textbook, which is pretty cool. Also, it's the free download like we discussed on this top page. You may want to plan the time in your own calendar for when and how you're going to work. Even if you don't know what the details are, we're going to talk a lot about practices, but you might just want to say, okay, doing 2 hours in this block on this day, or I'm going to try to come to this weekly session time. People are also welcome to add links to their own personal or ActInf blog platform. This is an affordance that not everyone is required to engage in. Nothing is mandated. It's totally just a service and an experience that we're co-creating in this first cohort. But you may want to have some short or medium or long writings about your reflections and about your learnings. So you may want to add this blog, and it's cool, some have already done that. And then we offer this student workspace. And the student workspace, you can click on that link and you head over to here. And there's a link that allows you to open a new Coda template and use this template. And so that copies this to your Coda account. So the template was created by ActInf Lab. However, it is not going to be like viewable or anything. So this is not something part of the textbook group shared cohort, Coda. This is just going to provide some tables and some templates for you to play around, but also be potentially tracking your progress in various ways. Next, we're going to go to the student practices, but would Alex or Yvonne or anyone like to just mention anything about onboarding or the student workspaces?
Yeah, I can give quick review on it.
Thank you.
could you open the list
Here?
of practices? This one. Student practices. Okay, it's okay. Also okay. Yeah, here's the table that uh, help you to track your um, track your study. So we understand that the textbook is um, not easy to read and not easy to uh, find time to have a study on it. So these practices will help you to keep your attention during the whole 3 months when we will study it. We have a small description uh, on each practice, and you can even understand what they are by its name. Um, go through it, and if you will have some questions, just let us know.
Thanks. That takes us perfectly to this student practices, which is kind of the question of, okay, we set the groundwork, we onboarded ourselves onto the textbook group using these checked boxes, and now we're ready to like participate and to engage with the content, which is going to be almost entirely asynchronous. We will have some live sessions like at this time or potentially at other times that others scaffold. However, it's going to be about the learner's engagement on their own terms and times with the content. And so that is where drawing on some practices from other areas, we have constructed this table of student practices. So it's kind of like a grab bag or a toolkit where people can find some affordance for their participation. So if you ever find yourself uncertain on how to participate in a textbook group or uncertain on how to increase your familiarity or your competency in active inference, these are practices that you can reach for. And you can add comments. And also, we can absolutely add to the practices. We can add rows. We can add descriptions and products. But these are some regimes of attention, some tasks you can engage in, which will help you become more familiar with the material. And so there is this practice of like thinking by speaking in dialogue, joining the synchronous meetings or arranging meetings of your own type. And then a lot of the other learning practices are going to be asynchronous. Alex or anyone else, would you like to ask anything? Okay. And yes, I just fixed the permissioning on the template, so now it should be possible for people to copy the template over. And then just one other random Coda tip. If you do control and scroll or control and plus minus, that can make the text bigger or smaller. So that can be quite helpful sometimes. Okay, so Alex or anyone else, any thoughts on practices?
Yeah, let me add something on these practices. We are organizing this textbook group, trying to provide some kind of uh, new affordances to learning path, which will be more effective if you're not just reading the textbook by your own, but also communicate inside this shared epistemic niche from one hand, and from another hand, based on our work in education, on some our projects, we understand that if you systematically applied some learning practices and tracking your progress, possibly day by day or week by week, with tools that also provided in the template, You just from the beginning it could looks like some easy stuff, but basically after applying these practices for a few weeks, you can figure out how it's really could be helpful for you. We understand that here different people with different background, different expertise, but for study groups, let's just be students again and just apply these practices, and it will bring us more results that we even can expect it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. So we're going to explore a little bit deeper into the practices, and then we'll talk more about this core shared epistemic aspect of our Coda. Because, of course, if people wanted to work alone and not have any synchronous exchanges with people and not have any shared epistemic niche, they could do that on their own. But we're doing something with the textbook group in the ActInf lab that's collaborative and participatory. So as seen in the template, but also on this page, mastering students' practices, the practices are there to help keep our attention as learners on the material through focusing on the practices. And so people can add their own columns and explore, but these are the kinds of things where if somebody could have high systematicity in developing them, like approaching them in a very systematic and comprehensive way, they would be learning and applying active inference as works for them. So that's kind of a cool way to have a self-paced and flexible educational experience. And these are also just the pages that are in that student workspace. So it'll be cool to see how these practices develop, and any comments or questions that people have on them. Does anyone want to raise their hand or ask a question in the chat? The template is not working for people right now. So
So I think, are there two templates? There's like the checklist template, and then there's the student workspace template. I'm not getting the student workspace one to work.
As I see, it doesn't work when you have a preview, but once you push the button use template, it became available for you.
has anyone, where's the use template button? So one thing also is people could just create a new Coda document and then just copy, just Control-C and copy it into a new page. So that will always work. And the template is not vast. It's just these several tables. So we'll try to figure out the permissions. Okay. All right. And also, so I'm going to unfold some of these areas that we've spoken about and continue on with some of the core epistemic components of our Coda. And again, anyone can raise their hand or can add a comment in the chat. Yes, Rohan, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, so I'm not able to make copies of this templates. So could you just show it once again if you don't mind?
Okay, so are you able to click these three dots and then do copy to doc and then copy it to a new doc?
Sorry, that doesn't show up for me. I'm not sure why.
Okay, so then it may just be because like I'm in the account that created it. So anyone can create a new Coda document, like by clicking this back arrow and then just creating a new document and not kind of on that type of homepage, and then just copy, like you can just go into this page and select the content and copy it and then just paste it into your Coda. And we'll try to figure out the template. Blue?
So it did work for me. If you, on the student workspace, like the red wheel one,
Okay.
so not the orange one, but the red wheel, if you click on the 3 dots that are next to the workspace in the sidebar, there you go. And click that and then copy to doc. That worked for me.
It still may, well, it depends on what somebody's access may be with ActInf documents, but copying will always work. Rohan, did that resolve it?
Okay, so I did that. I found the copy to doc. It made something. Not entirely sure where it is now.
So copy to doc, and then like we'll copy it to a new doc, and then
okay.
And then now that's totally your document, so it's not part of the ActInf workspace at all.
Okay, so I have to go back and then search for it. Is that it?
Yes, it becomes, so within the shared epistemic niche, within our shared Coda, it's all like subpages in one URL. But then once you copy it to your own doc from a template or however, it's going to be your own URL with your own sharing privileges. It's totally owned by you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I
Great.
found it. Yeah, so
Yay.
the copy to doc worked. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so anyone can raise their hand if they want or ask a question. Otherwise, we'll continue on to talk about the ways in which we're going to structure this collaborative discourse on the material. So this discourse section has a few subheadings. We have a page for ideas of the book. And so also, if anything is ever like unable to be edited, then just like, but you feel like it should be, then just let us know, because we tried to permission things to minimize the ability of someone to accidentally like delete informative text. And as much as possible, we'll structure things in tables, which should be editable. So in the ideas of the book, these are like memes and themes. What is active inference? Like when we want to convey that to ourselves and to others, those are the ideas. In chapter 1, this is an idea. And then there can be discourse on that. And these buttons open up a canvas and you can write things in there. We have questions. This is a really important and going to be hopefully a very fascinating and productive page. One Coda affordance that's very fun is @ is like calling a variable. And that could be anything from a person to the name of a page, a table, or even a row in a table. And so the questions can be written in plain text, but then also people may enrich them in this way. And so we're going to return to this question, but first I just want to show what equation 2.1 is, where is it coming from? So here in the equations section, we have another table with all the equations. Right now, just equation 2.1 has been added. What is the name of the equation? What is the picture of the equation, screenshot? What page, what chapter, and what are some tags, which we'll talk about soon too. But this is something that one person has to add one time. Then go back to questions. When something is blue with an @ you can mouse over it or you can click on it. So then how is equation 2.1 related to Markov blanket is something that's very accessible. It's interactive. We can have it translated into multiple languages. Like the terms we've already translated as a lab into 7 languages. And especially if people have a language that they'd like to improve or add, this can just be added. And so these kinds of questions that we all raise up. So whether or not you do this like ultra Coda version or you just want to write it in plain text and have somebody else improve it, this is going to be able to create computationally accessible representations of questions that are very clear and also answers that are very clear. And there can be multiple answers and a lot of discourse, but then those are addressing what are some answers to that question that like a person may have. And again, it's awesome if a question, instead of like coming from an ill-specified pointer and a unclear regime of attention, of course we have uncertainty. That's what the question is representing. But also we can ask it in a way where even if we totally don't know I don't know what equation 2.1 is showing, I don't know what the Markov blanket is, but by asking it in this way, there's like a conversation to have, and people can upvote interesting questions. And then again, we'll add the figures as rows in the figures, the equations here. So then someone can say, how does figure 1.1 relate to action? What was figure 1.1? Ah, okay. How does figure 1.1 relate to, okay, action? Those are just some of the ways in which we'll be able to have this really special interactive space. So that was that questions page where we'll just be building tons and tons of questions. And whether you write them initially in your own private workspace or you want to write them here, another important aspect of the questions is that the textbook doesn't have any exercises or questions of any kind. And so this is like in this first cohort and in this textbook group in general, we're in a sense creating some questions and clarifying adventures around this textbook itself as learners. So that's the questions page. In the live meetings page, we write that all are encouraged to join these live meetings or watch their video recordings, where we're going to be going over the ideas of the book and the questions. The timings are noted here of this weekly time slot and what the theme or the regime of attention is going to be. And also you've been added to a calendar using the email you signed up for, or you can add these links in. And then if somebody wants to propose a one-off time or a recurrent time where they want to co-work or they want to do these sessions, they absolutely can do that, and we can update the textbook group calendar here. The video recordings will be posted to these links afterwards. And in this first meeting, we're having the onboarding session now. This is going to set a pace for moving through the first 5 chapters of this textbook over the next 3 months. And there's plenty to dig into and plenty of rabbit holes to explore. And so some might go read ahead or be behind. You know, life happens and we're accommodating of that. But this is going to set a rhythm and a pace where we'll be able to go, okay, we're going to talk about chapter 1. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to the ideas of the book and the questions. We're going to look at what are some ideas in chapter 1. What are some questions that are tagged with specific references in chapter 1? And what has been upvoted if there's too many to discuss? And then that is going to be the structuring of the regime of attention. So it would be super helpful if somebody especially wants to like be speaking and asking questions about it, the material, to put in the time before to add those so that people can parse it and really consider your question and your ideas beforehand, because there's differences in our language and our familiarity with active inference. So sometimes the spontaneous rant is difficult for others to parse. And structuring our questions and writing the ideas down and helping improve how each other's have shared it will be a really important shared practice. And then we can have people in the live meetings taking notes on the questions. And so then if somebody does have a spontaneous thought arising in relationship to a question or some discourse on an idea, we can absolutely record it and make that something that persists rather than just a sort of offhand comment in a video chat. So those are the live meetings and the calendar. And we're in Gather right now. And so there's some information on if you'd like to, for example, enable various features of Gather, including adding live text captioning to your video if that's like something you're interested in. But this is just a little bit of a technical note on how to use gather and some of the affordances of gather. Okay. I cannot find the raise your hand button. I have not used it on an iPad. But on the bottom, there's a hand that raises your hand, and also it stays raised unless you unraise it. And then it's also there in the emoji, and all the emojis are transient, except for when you hit the hand or when you hit just 6 from your computer, then that raises your hand. But Ali, if you want to ask a question, then please feel free. But first, okay, Rohan, then Ivan.
Oh no, I was just testing the 6 thing. Sorry.
Great. Okay, seems like you were too, Ivan. So, great. Okay, so we have project ideas. So here was a suggestion by a participant. So as with many suggestions, this is our editable space. We're the first cohort of the textbook group. So however we want to do this, we can do it. Feel free to list any project ideas here. So this is a fully editable page. People can just add. Wouldn't it be cool? Like if there was an audiobook recording, I don't know. Maybe that's something that somebody else will see as a very exciting opportunity. So you can add different project ideas. And then we've provided a template for some tables that you can copy out that are kind of like questions that will help provide some overview information on your project. Optional, of course, just like everything, or add columns, add rows, delete. It's all up to you. And questions that are about the situation that you're seeing that is motivating that kind of a project idea and help you get some initial structuring around like how you would go about doing that. And this will get your idea from the sort of format here into something maybe that other people could get on board with. So that's in the discourse, because these are like really content and perspectives that as a textbook group, we're going to be adding and creating. In this textbook section, it's going to be really focused on the textbook as that core artifact. So as mentioned before, there's the special pages and tables with the figures, equations, and the boxes. So then, oh yes, at box space 2.1, enter. At box 2.1. Oh, okay, there it is. And then people can have any questions or comments and so on. And then that could be referenced in a question somewhere else. What does at box space 2.1 mean for ... There's also these chapters. And so the chapters are listed here and linked. So you can click on 5 and go to chapter 5. There's also a detailed table of contents, which may have been created by Dave, or he found it, but he sent it to us. And this is like a really fine-grained look at the sections of the book. And whichever column in a table has this ribbon is the one that's called the display column. So you can have like a set as display column. And so that means like I was reading at 1.4.2 and this happened. It's page 11. So every row and all of its associated columns can be referenced anywhere within this Coda. You won't be able to reference these rows in another Coda, but this is like our shared commons of information where we're able to enrich the rows and create rows for each other. And that will hopefully create kind of like a snowball effect with our digital stigmergy, because people will be able to ask amazing, well-supported questions. And then those questions themselves, when Blue asked, how is equation 2.1 related to this? Here's what it made me think of. So there's like a structuring to the way in which we can use certain pieces of information. And so again, we have the textbook section with the chapters, and like we're starting on chapter 1. And these are a lot of concepts and area where people can explore. Now, you'll see that a lot of terms have this at and they're blue. So let's look at where that is coming from. And that takes us to the last section of our Coda, and then we'll spend the last 15 minutes with just discussion and questions. Somebody has asked, does Coda allow text to be formatted with LaTeX? Thank you, Brock, for sharing the link. And yes, if people would like that, that's something we can absolutely do. Additionally, we could have a column here, insert column after, and this can just be the LaTeX representation, for example. So then you can copy and paste that to allow people to modify it or to use it in another work. Okay, so where are these core terms coming from? In active inference tables, we have a few different tables that are prepared and created also in a collaborative way in other projects of the ActInf lab. So those who are participating in the lab may know about some of these projects, but for those of you who might be joining the first ActInf lab activity right now, here's what these are about. So active inference ontology. You can go to this link and see the public version of the ActInf ontology. And so this is like a link you can share with anyone, and it has 2 pages. There's the definitions of core terms, which we'll return to, and then there's the translations. So here we have, I'll edit and resolve this, but for core terms, we have Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, Czech, Russian, and Hebrew. So if there's a language that somebody has some familiarity with, even if you only know some of it, it would be super helpful to start to work in the .edu organizational unit of ActInf Lab on this ontology project, because we're really focused on making this accessible to those with different mathematical backgrounds and also different speaking of different languages. So it's an awesome way, even if you don't know that much active inference, to translate some terms and potentially bridge into a totally new area. Those tables are in our Coda here. So there's like another Coda that's holding the actual ontology. And then this is a cross-document pull, which we can like sync. And so that's one of the really important and powerful features of Coda. So each of these terms can be called using an at. So at action space planning. And then clicking that enables the definition to pop up. And there's a ton of other columns, but we just wanted to pull a simple version. So the ontology page is hosting the table that is giving the definitions of different ontology terms. And also there's the public site. The live stream table has many, many papers. Some may be familiar or not, that we've done 150 plus live streams. The live streams in the roundtable section have to do with ActInf Lab updates and strategy. In the live stream section, these are on papers. And so you'll find 46 papers that we've been discussing over the last however many months. And these are like great if you want to dive into any of the papers that are listed here. The guest stream are visiting presentations and discussions that different individuals in the sort of ActInf or adjacent areas are presenting on. So if anybody has like a recommendation or a connection or would like to present on a guest stream, these are scheduled on a more ad hoc basis, but they have tons of awesome areas and applications. Model stream is more specifically about modeling. And one of particular note is this 4-part series with Christopher White and Ryan Smith on the step-by-step active inference guide, which is like a paper that is very, very similar to the textbook. It's not exactly the same, of course, but it also walks through a lot of the things that the textbook walks through. Then an org stream is about organization. And so we have also some other formats that haven't been used too much. And we have this symposium that we did with Carl Friston last year. So this live streams table is just if you feel like listening or watching some live streams on any number of a ton of different topics related to active inference that we've done as a lab. And these are ones that you can participate in. Like if you want to talk about some of these papers, you can join a live stream. Then there's this active inference research tab, which is just sort of a partial view, but it's been work with Blue and our colleague RJ, where we're working to be able to reference papers in a very rich and interactive way inside and outside of Coda. So you'll find the abstracts and some information on several hundred active inference papers in case you're looking for it. But there's also a lot more to this. So if you're interested in knowledge engineering and in curating active inference research and annotating research and these types of tasks, then this is like an awesome area. That takes us through the sections of the Coda. So just to recap, info contains some information on pre-onboarding with the rules and directory, and then the onboarding itself, which everybody is welcomed to carry out for themselves. Student Workspace provides some templates and ideas, which you can elaborate on and so on, but some ways that you can stay on top of carrying out the student practices. And so anytime you're uncertain about what actions to engage in to reduce your uncertainty about learning and applying active inference, these are always things that you can do. In the Discourse, that's going to host some of the material and the discussions that we're having synchronously and asynchronously around the book, about the ideas in the book and the questions that are raising up, and also hosting some project ideas that people are rising up or seeing as potentially relevant. Then the textbook itself is going to host unpacking and connections of the content in the chapters, and also with a special focus on this annotation of the figures, equations, boxes, and so on, that will allow the rest of the Coda to be like referencing the book very clearly. And then there's the active inference tables, which are just showing off a few of the Coda features and a few of the other projects in ActInf Lab. And so that will be at least the initial conditions of our Coda, and it'll probably evolve a lot in the coming 3 months. So that concludes the more presentation aspects of this onboarding session. For the next 15 minutes, anyone can type a question into the chat or can raise their hand and we'll hear from them. And then what's coming up next is over the next week, we'll be reading chapter 1, engaging with the practices as they relate to chapter 1, planning to read chapter 1, investing time in reading chapter 1, writing notes, adding a little blog post, asking questions about chapter 1, talking to your friends or family or ActInf colleagues about chapter 1, working with the formalisms in chapter 1. If people would like to, there's a totally optional link here that they can use a hypothesis annotation of the PDF. So just, it's there if people want to, but as with all these practices, they're totally optional, and this is like an off-site thing. And then we'll continue on. So that is, yes, okay, Roland asks, thanks for coordinating this. Are the authors going to be participating at all? So we're in contact with the authors, and I won't speak for them into their degree of participation in the future, which is unknown. But they're excited and hopefully happy that we're engaging in this way, and we are in contact with them. But if there's some other piece of information we can provide, sure.
Also, they'll be watching the recorded videos, at least one of the authors. So
Yes. Some of them may view some recorded videos and they have access to the Coda. And it would be awesome, for example, to have questions that we don't know the answer to. Maybe they do know the answer, but also maybe they don't. And maybe there's somebody here who does, or there's another author who we can contact. The textbook is a summary and a distillation and a tip of the iceberg of a lot of ongoing research. And so asking those questions, and then also in the ActInf lab, we have relationships and ways of engaging with many authors and relevant people, hopefully. So we could make it happen if it's important to make it happen. Rohan or anyone else with a question? In the chat or with their hand, what is something that people are just excited or motivated about? What do they expect?
Daniel,
Yes.
did you not hear Rohan?
No, it says connecting for me. Sorry about that. Could you?
Oh yeah. So Rohan just asked a question. Maybe I think he might need to reload, but his question was, will there be any code involved at all? What is the preferred platform for writing code, or is it just math?
Thanks. So Appendix C, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Sometimes this does happen, as the recording will show, you're just connecting. And so in those cases where it seems like two people in Gather are having a missed connection, one or both people can reload and it usually fixes it. So sorry about that. In the code section, there's going to be a few ways to engage with the code. One thing is that Appendix C is an annotated MATLAB code. So especially in the older work related to SPM, statistical parametric mapping, and some of the earlier active inference work, MATLAB was the primary language that was utilized. More recently, there's been developments in Python and in Julia. Yes, absolutely. So PyMDP does offer code. So that's in Python. And then another area of code that some may be interested in developing in is active blockference, which is also in Python and was initiated by Jakob. And active blockference is implementing active inference entities and environments in CAD, which is a complex systems design suite. So that's in Python. There's also Julia and some active inference methods in Julia that are created by the Bias Lab. And we also have created this repository in GitHub for the textbook itself. So if anybody comments on this and just says, add me, here's my GitHub username right here, we'll add them to that repository. So if people want to do their own code adventure, of course, great, make it happen. If people want to work in a shared code repository space, we'll have this. If people want to do any adventures in Python and Julia and PyMDP and active blockference and Forney Lab and all these other amazing affordances, they're absolutely welcome to. We'll just remember that we're learning the content of the textbook in the textbook group, and those are amazing research and application avenues that are super important, and it's exactly what learning active inference gets us to the position of being able to engage with. And I think there's, as we'll maybe uncover, reasons why the book is written primarily in natural language and figures and equations. It could have been a notebook, but it wasn't. So yes, hopefully for those who are computationally inclined, we'll have some code available. And also, again, people can raise their hand or ask a question, but this is what the ontology, as we develop it, and it's already far more developed than this, but if people want to get involved here, one of the aims is to have integrity across different representations of different human natural languages, different computational languages, and the formalisms and the analytical nature of some of the core of active inference. And so we can, in the equations, have tags. So that will help us use ontology tags to connect equations to scripts that are out there using those same terms. And so there can be like a short blog article in another language you don't speak, and a script in a computer language you don't understand, and a figure that you didn't make, but we can connect that and generate and comprehend it in a way that may not have been done in other fields or at other times. So those are some of the really exciting ways that we can combine our perspective and our regimes of attention with appropriate collaboration so that we can actually learn and apply active inference better. Because again, if people just wanted to listen to the Friston lectures on YouTube and read the book alone, they absolutely can. But to be engaged in the textbook group is to be doing something that's collaborative. So hope that addresses it. And if anybody else wants to raise their hand or ask a question in the chat, there's still time to do so. Yeah, in the chat though, what do people expect and prefer? What would be epistemically valuable for you? What would be pragmatically valuable for you? On the top right, you can switch from light to dark in the Coda, just in case it looks very different for you. So yeah, this onboarding session could have been about any topic, although we were looking at active inference related themes and we're setting up, of course, for the textbook group. We didn't discuss any of the material, but that's exactly what is going to be happening in the actual weeks to come. So if anyone has like any kind of notes they'd like to add in for the people who are here and for the people who may be rewatching this recording, feel free to add anything again if anybody wants to. Okay. So I typed a slash, which opens up Coda affordances, like inserting any number of things, and then inserting a table. And this will be active inference code. And so then we can go from the unstructured list to the structured list into the table. What language is it? Is it a walkthrough or is it something for application, and structure that discussion around code? Yeah, thank you everybody who's joining. We're enacting the kind of epistemic niche for active inference that we are implicitly or explicitly expecting and preferring. So we might as well. And the organizing, we can also note, was in EDU and comms, so in 2 of our weekly ActInf Lab meetings. So there's a whole team and many people contributed variously to setting up this niche. And set up the niche was all we did. Like, it's for us to actually co-create in our learning, but this was a participatory project, just like everything in ActInf Lab is. So if anybody is like wanting to learn more about participating in other ActInf Lab activities, on the top page, you can learn more about becoming a participant in ActInf Lab as well. So there's like a ton of cool projects to get involved in, including active block forensics and the ontology, educational materials, future cohorts of the textbook group, and so on. So there'll be a ton to do. All right. So that concludes the onboarding session. I'm going to stop the recording unless anyone has any final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.